Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Ansara, a volunteer with Volunteer Blue. Volunteer Blue and our partner organizations welcome you to this rescheduled No King Then and No King Now with Heather Cox-Richardson, Attorney General Andrea Campbell, and Representative Jamie Raskin. Volunteer Blue is an all-volunteer effort making it easy for people to volunteer to save our democracy. You know, in a way, I wish we were on a regular Zoom today so you could see the thousands. We're at 5,000 on the Zoom, but because more than 19,000 people registered, we had to make it a webinar and also live stream it on YouTube. For the 5,000 people on Zoom, please continue to put your name and where you're from and your organization in the chat so everyone can see the amazing breadth of who is joining today from all over this country. Quick bit of housekeeping. Everyone will be muted. We're recording this webinar, and we will send you all an email with both the recording and all the links to the organizations and actions discussed. Please use the chat, but put your questions for our speakers in the Q&A, not the chat. Again, welcome everybody, and let's get started. Everything that we feared, everything that we worked so hard to prevent is now happening. We're seeing incredible damage being inflicted on our country and the world. 250 years after we threw off a king, Trump and MAGA are destroying our democracy. But there is hope. We are seeing fast-growing opposition. Trump's actions and policies are increasingly unpopular. Every action is now producing strong reactions. Most importantly, as we'll discuss shortly, there are things that each of us can do. We are in an urgent fight to save our democracy. We must fight everything Trump is doing, everywhere and all at once. And we are. We are fighting in the courts. We are fighting in Congress, at the ballot box, in town halls, in universities, in law firms, outside of Tesla dealers, at national parks and public libraries, and in communities in every part of the country. It is a fight we must win. It is a fight that with your help, we will win. It will not be easy. It will be a long, hard 4-year struggle. Today, we'll explore the dimensions of that struggle, and we will end the program with a focus on what you can do. First, we will hear from Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell, who will discuss the battle in the courts and then take questions. Then Heather Cox-Richardson will provide context and analysis, and Congressman Jamie Raskin will discuss the battle in Congress. Then they both will take your questions. Please put those questions in the Q&A. Finally, we will focus on what you can do. I hope you will stay on after the speakers so that we can share with you the actions and volunteer opportunities that our many amazing partner organizations provide. We're dropping a link in the chat right now to a list of our partners so you can take a look at them. On to our first speaker. Immediately after the election, Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell went to work to prepare for Trump's illegal and unconstitutional actions. She has been a critical leader of 22 attorney generals who've been working together, researching, coordinating, and filing lawsuits to challenge Trump. We are so lucky to have her with us today. Attorney General Campbell, the virtual floor is all yours.
Jess Laverty, could you please turn on your video so I can show you?
Few technical problems as we get the Attorney General on. Here we go.
The AG is trying to get on right now. We're just having a couple technical issues. I apologize.
All right, well, everybody keep putting the news in the chat where everybody's from. I hope you're having a chance to look at it. It is from all over the country, from every part of the country, and so many different organizations, activists, and great work being done. As soon as we can get to the Attorney General, we will. Jess, let me ask you, should we change the agenda around? How quick?
If
will we-
if that's possible, we're wondering if it's a capacity issue, but we're working on it. I'm sorry for this.
It is probably a capacity issue because we're over our 5,000 limit. Um, So I think we will just change around. And Heather Cox-Richardson has been kind enough to juggle things for us. So let me ask Heather to come on. Our next speaker is historian Heather Cox-Richardson. She really needs no introduction. We have come to rely on her wisdom, historical context, and trenchant analysis. Heather has been so incredibly generous, really tireless in supporting the grassroots efforts to oppose Trump. It's really an honor once again to have her with us. Heather, it's all yours.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank everybody for coming here. It's so much fun to see where everybody is from, and the comments you're putting in the chat, which I read as we're sitting back here. So thank you for being here. And yeah, this is really a grassroots movement to reclaim our democracy, and it's a privilege and an honor to be part of it. But it's also, I think, a time for us to understand what we want out of democracy and what we really should be trying to achieve going forward. So this is a moment for us, ordinary Americans, to come together to take back our country. And what I mean when I say that is that quite literally, our Constitution establishes that the power of our government comes from us. Quite literally, it starts with we the people, and we the people give sovereignty to a Congress and to an executive and to a judiciary to make laws that we are willing to live under. And when that government ceases to do that, it's up to us to take that government back. Now, what does that actually look like, though? People have asked for places in the past that I can point to where this has happened, where ordinary Americans have woken up and said, no, we're not okay with the government that's over us. And I always point to the 1850s, really, when ordinary Americans across the North looked at the takeover of the US government by the elite enslavers and said, we don't agree with each other about immigration or about finance or about internal improvements, but by God, we can agree that we don't want an oligarchy and that we want to preserve American democracy. And from that, ordinary people created Abraham Lincoln. I mean, he was sort of a nobody in 1855 who had served one undistinguished term in the House of Representatives and was a corporate lawyer. But he listened to what ordinary people were saying, and he articulated a new kind of government for the United States. And that's where we get our first real progressive government that reacts to the needs of ordinary Americans. And you've probably heard me talk about that a lot. But in this moment, when we are approaching 250 years of the American nation itself, based in the Declaration of Independence, I think it's kind of more fun in this moment to look at what happened across the British colonies of North America between, about 1763 to 1776, and especially in these months leading up to the Declaration of Independence, between the battles of Lexington and Concord in April of 1775 and what is going to become the Declaration of Independence in July of 1776. And what happened then really reflects, I think, on where we are today. That is, the country was bitterly divided between loyalists who thought that we really needed to have the heavy hand of a monarch over the colonies because they were so unruly and you just couldn't trust your neighbor, and you wanted to make sure that there was a system in place in which everybody knew their place. And those people who said no, that in fact the people in the United States of America, it was going to become the United States of America, had grown accustomed to making their own rules because there was so much time that had to elapse between the royal officials in the colonies getting orders from Britain, that often they sort of went their own way. And often somebody would be removed from office and still be in the office, but then somebody else would take his place, and you could never really tell who was supposed to be in charge. large because of that extraordinary time lag across the Atlantic. So in the United States, people had become used to the idea that they had a right to have a say in their government. And when a government came in and said, no, 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 in fact, we are going to dictate to you the rules under which you're going to live, people in the colonies started to look at each other and say, well, no, we don't think that's a good idea. We want to stand on this idea that we have a right to have a say in our government and a right to be treated equally before the law. But, after the battles of Lexington and Concord in April 1775, when there had been significant bloodshed that was then followed up by the Battle of Bunker Hill, when yet more people died, a lot of Americans, or people who were going to be Americans, sort of backed away and said, is this really what we think we want to do? And in that moment, that idea of reclaiming a country in which everybody had a say, the voices that were really important were less the ones that you read in the history books than ordinary people, and especially women, who started to look around them and to say, no, we really don't want to have a society where our husbands and our sons, and at that point they thought themselves, were not going to be able to determine the conditions under which they lived. And you see them starting to come together and talking to their neighbors and deciding that, they're not going to drink tea anymore. That's actually when Americans started to drink coffee instead of tea. They're going to start using products that reflect their independence from a strong government that's going to tell them how to live. And they talk to individuals, and they come together in communities, and they come together around dining room tables to talk about what they want out of their country. And that was kind of like a brush fire. It took off across the country. And finally, the one thing they couldn't get over was the idea of throwing off a king. And finally, there's just this pamphlet that gets published in January of 1776, in which Thomas Paine, of whom you've heard, writes this book called, it's really a pamphlet called Common Sense, in which he says, no, this is not just about the king having some bad ministers. This is about the whole concept of monarchy. And in this country, we do not want to be ruled by somebody on the other side of the Atlantic. And in this country, if we have a king, the law is king. We are not going to bow to any man. And when that happens, the whole movement really turns into an advancing of the concept of human self-determination. And really, quite famously, the person who articulates that in a letter to John Adams is a woman named Mercy Otis Warren, who is married to a famous revolutionary. But she actually writes to John Adams, another famous revolutionary, and knows that her husband will see it. She puts an addition on a letter in which she tells the men to stop piddling at the threshold and declare independence. So what you see there is this all of society movement to determine what that society's values are going to be. And central to that society, they put the values of equality before the law, the right to have a say in your government, and the right to have equal access to resources. And that's what they're going to put in the Declaration of Independence. So when I think about where we are now in this country, I know stuff is coming at us all the freaking time. I mean, just since you all jumped on this call, there's more really sort of kind of earth-shattering news that has come down. But as this is coming at us and we don't know how to act, we don't know how to react to things, I think it's really important to remember that those fundamental principles that started this whole endeavor in the first place, that we have a right to be treated equally before the law, we have a right to have a say in our government, and we have right to equal access to resources like healthcare and education and so on, are the North Stars to hang on to, so that you don't necessarily have to remember who the latest nominee for the something position in wherever is and whether or not you agree with that, but rather, are we advancing those central causes? And if we stand together on that, and remind people that that's what the United States is supposed to stand for, I think we can build the sorts of coalitions that can, in fact, create the arrival of democracy on a continent that had been characterized in its British settlement by monarchy. We can stop the takeover of our country by a very small group of oligarchs who want to control labor, or we can stop it from the oligarchs who later on rose because they had all the capital in the country. And we can reclaim a country as we did in the 1930s 1930s under Franklin Delano Roosevelt that actually works for ordinary Americans. We are never going back to January 19th, 2025. But if you think about it, there were a lot of things about that period in January of 2025 that weren't necessarily answering everyone's needs. Money was concentrating. Lots of people didn't have health care and so on and so forth. We have the opportunity not only to save American democracy, but to build it into what it could really be. So I urge you to take up oxygen, talk to your friends, work with these organizations here, work in your state governments and your national government, but also to remember that we have the extraordinary opportunity to create something new and exciting, and our voices are critically important in doing that. So I'm really glad you came, and I can't wait to hear what other people have to say.
Thank you, Heather. And Heather's been so nice again. She's going to take questions, but we're going to go to the Attorney General. Then we're going to come back and hopefully hear from Congressman Raskin. He's involved in some stuff, so hopefully he'll be able to join us. And then Heather and Congressman Raskin will take questions. So let me reintroduce our wonderful Attorney General here in Massachusetts, who has been working with 22 Attorney Generals around the country. They immediately realized that it would take court action to impede Trump. And so Attorney General Andrea Campbell helped organize those other Attorney Generals and has been leading them. And we are so glad to have you with us. Thank you, Attorney General. The virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael. And of course, Heather, thank you as well. Thank you to Volunteer Blue for your leadership. Thank you to the congressman who I know will also be joining us and who I learned also was a Massachusetts AGO alum. So I am grateful to each and every one of you. Thank you, Peter. Here's my son. But in the midst of this gratitude I'm extending to all of you, and I'm grateful to all that you're doing, all of the organizers on this call, all of you who are in many ways on the front lines along with us. I never take that for granted. So thank you for being a part of this call or joining us via YouTube. I also want to acknowledge the fact that there are many folks as we sit on this Zoom who are experiencing real practical fear. And there may be some folks on this very Zoom who are experiencing that fear and that anxiety, whether in our immigrant communities, LGBTQ plus community, our young people who are experiencing politics for the first time, you name it. And I think it's really important to acknowledge it. I've said the same to my AG colleagues across the country. I think it's not only important to acknowledge it, but I want folks to know that we have your back and that we will do everything in our power to deal with that fear that you are feeling, but most importantly, to use the tools of our office to respond in this moment in time with a sense of urgency in response to what you're feeling. And it truly is Democratic AGs that are not only going to have your back, but who are stepping up every single day to protect our residents' rights and at the same time our respective state economies. But I'm not going to leave you with doom and gloom. And part of that is because I believe in leading with joy. And that's not only because my middle name is Joy, but also because my faith demands it. And also because as the first Black woman AG of this incredible Commonwealth, it's an honor and privilege to serve in this role. And I think that first also demands that I lead with joy and stand in that in this moment in time. And while I'm blessed to be the first Black woman to serve in this role, I also never forget where I come from, which also informs why I do the work with a sense of urgency and why I do it with joy. I was born and raised in the city of Boston and Roxbury in the South End. Sadly, when I was 8 months old, my mom died in a car accident going to visit my father, who was in prison at the time. And my father was incarcerated for the first 8 years of my life. And during those first 8 years, my brothers and I, we bounced around. We sometimes lived with my grandmother who struggled with alcoholism. And when she was struggling, we were in the foster care system with relatives, just in different places at different times. And then finally, my father would get out of prison when I was 8 years old. And I met him for the first time. But sadly, he wouldn't live to see me graduate from college. When I was a sophomore at college, I talked to him one morning. He died the same evening when I was 19 years old. All of my biological grandparents are deceased. And sadly, 12 years ago, my twin brother Andre would die as a pretrial detainee while in the custody of the Department of Correction, which oversees our prisons here in Massachusetts, at the age of 29 as a result of receiving inadequate health care. And I share that story because I think it's important in these moments in time that we all think about our stories in moments of that we have overcome some trauma or something of significance where we've not only gotten over it, we've gotten through it, and oftentimes by ourselves. And I want my folks in my community, in this state and across the country to know that as we battle this federal administration and this bully of a president, you are not alone. You have AGs that are looking to partner and work with you and to protect you. I also reflect on the fact that I'm the first in my family to go to college. I went to Princeton University, the first in my family to go to law school. But I always know that it's my job and responsibility to ensure that I use the tools of my office to break cycles of poverty, incarceration, mediocrity, not just for my two beautiful boys, one of whom just popped in here, but also families all across this country and of course in Massachusetts as well, to use the tools of government to respond to their needs with a sense of urgency and not to waste any time. I also focus on those folks who've ever felt left out or left behind, where a government has not served them and has not served them well. So I share my story to say, in terms of everything that's happening in Washington, bring it on. Some people have even suggested that when you take on this work as an AG and you do it with fearlessness, targets may be placed on our back. Again, I say, bring it on. And in this moment in time, the AGs are organizing to do all types of things. We are not only standing up and fighting for you, we are actually on the front lines, I would say more so than other elected officials because we have certain tools available to us. We know, for example, that the courts and our litigation tools serve as a powerful check on this administration's disregard for the rule of law. We are leveraging that litigation tool every single day to push back on the unlawful actions of this administration, fighting for funding for biomedical research and life-saving funding, fighting for funding that will help us address our clean energy goals in each of our respective states, fighting for funding that will bring about jobs and infrastructure projects, fighting for funding that will actually help us protect our public education system, and so much more. And we are winning. And as we fight to stand up not only for the Constitution and the rule of law, I've been reminding folks that these are not pie in the sky concepts. You can't have a functioning economy. You can't address affordability issues or rises in pricing that we're all experiencing if you don't have a constitution, if you don't have the rule of law. We're also protecting immigrants, including by protecting the 14th Amendment and birthright citizenship. We filed a lawsuit in that case and we won. We're taking on Elon Musk and really getting at not only halting this co-president, but holding him accountable and making sure he's not unlawfully accessing your personal data. And I'm just scratching the surface of all the AGs are doing across the country right now in support and on your behalf. We will not only continue to hold the president accountable, we will also fill the void. We continue to do work that is necessary and responsive to our constituents' needs. We're working on expanding access to affordable housing. We are actually continuing to do the work to address the opioid crisis and public safety concerns and removing drugs and guns off the street, I feel like every day. We are taking on consumer protection. We're putting money back into the pockets of workers, protecting elders from elder abuse, continuing to protect our kids from tech companies, and addressing this mental health epidemic that exists not only in Massachusetts, but in this country. And we will do all of that not only because the feds have stopped doing that, because frankly, no one else has the tools and the most impactful tools to fill that void. It is truly the AGs. And I want you to know that I personally, and I can't speak for every other Democratic AG in this country, but I personally will do it with no sense of fear. As I say to my team every day, put a target on my back, because I feel in this moment in time, this is when elected officials must exercise leadership. I share my story because I know I would not be able to even sit on this Zoom with you, being the Attorney General of an incredible state, if it weren't for folks who came before, if it weren't for a constitution that guarantees that all of us would have access to opportunity equally, if it weren't, for example, those who were enslaved in this country with lashes on their backs, who did everything in their power to ensure that I could run for office someday, and that my children would also have access to meaningful opportunities. The history of Black folks, So I encourage us all to remind ourselves of the great history of this country and use it as an opportunity to not only get past and push past that fear, but most importantly, to move forward with a sense of joy and optimism. And lastly, I will just end with this. We AGs cannot do it by ourselves. We need each and every one of you to also be a part of this work. Absolutely organize, march, support Volunteer Blue, run for office yourselves. And I would just add, get to know who your Attorney General is. Follow us on social media. Join our efforts, invest in our leadership. In my case, get on the joy ride, because I think it's actually, even though it may be a little bumpy, for me, it is about making sure it's joyful and hopeful in this moment in time. And so thank you for having me. Know that we have your back. We are in this fight with you. And while they may attempt to pluck off one person or one institution or one law firm one by one, what they know to be true is that they cannot pluck off all of us if we are organized, if we work together, and if we come together and join each other collectively in this fight. So thank you. I will do everything I can to support this incredible organization and all of you. Michael, as always, thank you for having me. Great to see you. Apologies for the tech issues.
No problem at all. This is Attorney General Campbell. We have a lot of questions. We can't get to all of them, but there are a couple that are many people have asked. So one of the ones that many different people have asked on the Zoom is, Steve Miller said the administration is thinking of getting rid of the writ of habeas corpus. What actions can prevent that?
They can try, and just like they will try to also disregard the court judicial orders that we are seeing. It truly is Democratic AGs also working, of course, with Congress to go into court and to ensure they can't dismantle our Constitution, they can't dismantle our federal laws, and they can't dismantle our state laws and state protections afforded to our constituents. And so they may threaten these actions, but we will continue to go to court and we will continue to win. And one thing that I think is really important to lift up that often is lost in the media narrative, every time they go into court, they actually do not challenge the fact that we are saying their actions are unlawful and in violation of the laws or the Constitution. Instead, what they're telling the court is we shouldn't be in court or in the wrong court, or the issue is not right for discussion. Playing games in many ways because they know their actions are unlawful. And what we're seeing now is a judicial system and judges that are stepping up, including those at the Supreme Court, to protect the rule of law and our Constitution, and also due process, which they know should be afforded to everyone.
Another question that a number of people have asked, is there anything that attorney generals can do to prevent ICE agents from abusing their powers? Is there any way when ICE agents kidnap people without warrants to arrest ICE agents, or in some way make them pay a price for this?
This is what we're dealing with right now. Most folks have probably seen the news by right now, and a relevant example is Ramesa, a tough student who was just abducted off the street of Massachusetts. And for 24 hours, no one knew where she was. She came here legally and lawfully. And in addition to that, she had no criminal record, no allegations that she violated any criminal law, and was a professor and a Fulbright scholar, and respected by the Tufts community and her peers. And she was just released on bail a few hours ago after a very long process, and there's still a lengthy battle ahead. And so the courts are working in many ways. If anything, we will maximize our tools in the AG's office, as we did working with her immigration attorney and attorneys, to make sure that we are checking the powers of ICE in this federal administration. But others will also have to step up and recognize that while we may not be, as some may say, in a constitutional crisis, it's not an on or off switch. It's a turning of a dial, and we're heading in a dangerous direction. But the AGs will do everything in their power to protect our constituents while also holding ICE officials accountable within our respective states.
So we have time just for two more questions, but there's a series of questions that are related, which let me just read them and you figure out which way you want to answer them. So one, are the AGs really meeting every day at 4? Are there any active attorney generals from red states who are helping in any way? Can you share a list of the state's attorney generals you're working with so we can thank them or support them? And what advice do you have for those of us burdened with having Republican AGs? And what are all the ways that citizens can support their attorney generals?
All great questions. We do meet frequently, not every day at 4 o'clock, at different times, but we are in regular communication with each other. And sadly, it is only Democratic AGs. And it's not for lack of trying. I work with my Republican counterparts on other matters, but when it comes to holding this president and this federal administration accountable and upholding the rule of law, they were nowhere to be found. And so for those who are living in states where you do not have a Democratic AG, and every Democratic AG is stepping up from Massachusetts to New Jersey to Washington to Hawaii, California, you name it. If it's a Democratic AG, at one point in time, we've all attached to various cases to protect our rights of our citizens and also of our residents and protect access to funding and other crucial services. But I would say if you're in a state with a Republican AG, know that we're fighting for you too. NIH is a great example. We led the efforts on that in protecting access to funding for this critical biomedical research that affects every state. We're talking, for example, clinical trials for pediatric cancer. And we won relief, not just for blue states, we won relief for blue and red states. And why I'm really proud to work with my Democratic AGs in this moment in time is, as we do this work, we don't look at a letter by someone's name. We look at the fact that they're a human being that deserves a government that's responsive to their needs, that listens to them, and most importantly, delivers for them, regardless of the state they're in. So for those who are in a state where the Republican AG know we're fighting for you, and maybe you might want to think about running for office in your state or encouraging others to run for office for that AG role if they are not meeting your needs.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, and stay
Attorney General
blessed,
Campbell,
everyone.
Thank you for the work you're doing. Keep it up. Know that you've got support from all of us on this call, and that we're counting on you and the other Democratic AGs to fight for the Constitution. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
So it's my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who again is someone who really needs no introduction, Congressman Jamie Raskin. We are so glad to have you here. We are so glad to have you fighting for the Constitution and fighting in Congress and fighting around the country. The floor is yours.
Michael and Sarah, thank you very much. I feel like I know you. I've been reading your wonderful memoir, which I highly recommend to my friends out there. It's just beautifully rendered and brings alive a time in our history that we all need to understand and know about. And so you are an invaluable resource to us. As always, a natural-born organizer who recognized his calling as an organizer as far back as, I don't know, high school or middle school. So that's very cool. Hey, I'm delighted to be with everybody. And I'm happy that we're in a place where everybody understands that we are indeed in the fight of our lives here. And we are in the midst of seeing a full-blown authoritarian attack on American democratic institutions, the rule of law, and the rights and freedoms of the people. What is authoritarianism? It is the destruction of the rule of law for the ends of wiping out the material security and the rights and the freedoms of the vast majority of the people in order to massively enlarge and aggrandize the wealth and the power and the privileges of the people at top, on the top of the pyramid. This is something that you can see very clearly in any number of attacks on universal public programs like Social Security or Medicaid, the programs that are the great achievements of the civilizing movements of American democracy. You can see it also in the scams and the grifts that the Trump administration and Elon Musk have imposed on the rest of us. I think the country's just waking up to the various cryptocurrency scams and schemes that are being run against American democracy. It's in the Constitution in Article 1, Section 9 that nobody in federal office, and certainly not the president, can receive a present, an emolument, which means a payment, an office or a title of any kind, whatever, says the Constitution, from a king, a prince, or a foreign state. Now, we saw Donald Trump run afoul of that principle madly in the first administration with millions and millions of dollars collected from China, from the United Arab Emirates, from Indonesia, from countries all over the world who used the Trump Hotel and the various golf courses as a channel for money coming in. Well, that was small potatoes. That looks like a Cub Scout picnic compared to what's going on right now with the cryptocurrency corruption, where foreign states are putting in not millions, but hundreds of millions of dollars. Billions of dollars have been made already in the first 3 or 4 months of the administration. They're basically the Trump family alone is making $1 billion a month in taking all of this money from their fellow autocrats and plutocrats and dictators and fascists from around the world. So while they are trying to dismantle our basic institutions like Medicaid, like due process, like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, like the Agency for International Development, like NIH, the National Institutes for Health, at the same time, they are raking in untold and unprecedented amounts of money and power for themselves to continue to wage these wars against the basic rights and freedoms of the American people. So this is where we are, but we can appreciate the fact that there is a much greater level of high octane political intensity on the side of Democrats across the country, that those who stand in the doorway and block off the hall, as Bob Dylan put it, are being swept aside or are going to be swept aside because being a member of Congress or being a governor or an attorney general or any of these jobs is not just an opportunity to go and push a red button or a green button and then send out a monthly newsletter. The people want us and need us to be organizers and strategic leaders to defend our democracy and our Constitution and our rule of law. And that means that we need to be providing the best possible ideas and advice to get through this nightmare. And, like in a game of chess or football, we need to be playing offense and defense at the same time. We have to be trying to stop the onslaught against the rights of our people. For example, Medicaid, which is on my mind because there was a 24-hour vigil here, or the attack on Social Security, where they've sacked 7,000 Social Security workers, making it nearly impossible to get through on the phones for people to make their Social Security plans. But we also need to be on offense. And I think it was Tocqueville who remarked in Democracy in America that democracy and voting rights in our country are either shrinking and atrophying or they're growing and expanding. And we've been in this terrible contractionary phase with the attack on voting rights in the Supreme Court's decision in Shelby County versus Holder, with all of the voter suppression and disenfranchisement mechanisms. We've got to get back on the growth track. We need a constitutional amendment guaranteeing the right to vote. We need the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We need to attack gerrymandering, which has been the linchpin of racist, white supremacist political power throughout the South. We need to get back on the growth track in terms of statehood. And no, I'm not talking about Greenland or Canada or Panama. I'm talking about Washington, D.C., 713,000 draftable, tax-paying citizens who have been completely locked out of any voting representation in the U.S. Congress, 3.5 million people in Puerto Rico. So we got to get democracy moving again. And John Dewey said that the only solution to the ills of democracy is more democracy. And what we're suffering from today is not democracy, but all of the impediments to it, all of the obstructions of it. So let's get back on that growth track, my friends. Let us do it. I'll leave you with the words of, let's do two democracy heroes of mine I've kept close to my heart through this period. One, Frederick Douglass, who was born about a half an hour away from my house at the Wye River plantation into slavery. He escaped from slavery to become our great freedom fighter during the Civil War and Reconstruction. And he said, if there's no struggle, there's no progress. The struggle may be moral, it may be physical, it may be moral and physical, but there must be struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. And finally, I'll leave you with the words of Tom Paine, who my son Tommy was named after. And Tom Paine got to America in 1774, 2 years before the American Revolution. He fell in love with the promise of the country, even understanding all of its faults and limitations and the struggles it would have to go through. And he was an early abolitionist, and he was a woman suffragist in the 18th century too. But he knew that America could become the hope for humanity. He said, if this land lives up to its ideals, it will become an asylum to humanity, he said, and not an insane asylum, but a place of refuge for people seeking freedom from political and intellectual and religious repression from all over the world. And he wrote Common Sense, which ignited the American Revolution. And in that year, which was a very tough year, the country was split down the middle. And half the people were saying, you can't beat the greatest empire that ever existed. You can't beat the kings and the queens and the autocrats and the monarchs and the union of church and state. For all of time, people have lived under dictators like Vladimir. The fate of humanity. And half of the people said, no, let us give it a try. Let's pledge to each other our honor and our sacred lives, our fortunes. Let's give it a try. Let's fight for democratic governance based on the consent of the governed and the freedom and rights of the people. Anyway, he wrote this pamphlet called The American Crisis, and I'm going to update the language a little bit so it doesn't offend modern sensibilities. But he said, these are the times that try men and women's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will shrink at this moment from the service of their cause and their country, but everyone that stands with us now will win the love and the favor and the affection of every man and every woman for all time. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, but we have this saving consolation. The more difficult the struggle, the more glorious in the end will be our victory. So let's make that victory ours. Thank you, Michael and Sarah. I yield back to you.
Thank you so much. We're going to bring Heather Cox-Richardson back as well. And we're going to pose some questions from the audience to both of you. So the first one, let's get Heather spotlighted as well. There she is. So the first one is, let's lead with Heather and then follow up with Congressman Raskin. Do you think there will be fair elections in 26 and beyond?
Well, remember, I'm a prophet of the past, not the future. So I can predict the future as well as anybody else can. I think like Congressman Raskin, and thank you so much for all your work. And when I say that, I'm not speaking just for myself. I've been reading the chat, and I'm saying that for everybody who's been saying it in the chat. We have to insist on it. We have to keep being in the streets and requiring people to face that we don't want to have voter suppression and that we want to get rid of gerrymandering. And as we are doing that, of course, we are winning in the courts, but it's not something to give up on. And then I'll throw it to the congressman. What do you think?
Well, I mean, in some sense, we never have a fair election because so many of the most routine bureaucratic rules relating to elections make it very tough for people to register. They make it very tough for people to vote. There are a lot of democratic countries on earth, of course, where the government takes responsibility for making sure that everybody's registered. I lived over in France for a year, and when babies are born, they get registered immediately into the healthcare system and the social security system, and then also they're registered to vote. So when they turn 18, they can just start voting. They're already part of the rolls. Whereas we've got a system where different state political elites and parties will do everything they can to make it difficult for people to get registered. There are a lot of places where if you miss one election, even if you miss it because you've been driven out of the ballot box by different mechanisms, then they throw you off the rolls. You've got to go register again. and you've got to go and prove that you're qualified to vote. So look at some of the stuff that's been going on in Georgia and North Carolina. It's a nightmare. Texas, it's a nightmare. So we've got real problems in just getting people the basic right to vote. And that's without even, getting into things like the role of dark money, Citizens United, and so on. So we will fight for a free and fair election everywhere, but we got to fight for it. And nobody should sit back and wait and, say, well, let's see if we're going to have a free election or a fair election. It's not going to work like that. We're going to have to fight for it every place. The good news is that in most of the swing states now, Democrats are well organized. We've got governors, we've got people who can fight for fair elections. But in too many parts of the country, we've got people like Donald Trump who are interested in lying about elections and interested in erecting as many obstacles as possible.
Thank you.
And just to add
Go
on
ahead.
to that, one of the ways you can tell if you're in a state where there is voter suppression going on, which has been going on since 1986, is are they trying to take away ballot boxes and are they trying to make the amount of time available to vote shorter? So if you look at Texas or Florida or North Carolina or Pennsylvania, for example, those are states that we talk about as being Republican states, but it's better to think about them as voter suppression states because there is this concerted effort going on to make sure only certain people have the opportunity to vote. So it's all around us. But like the congressman said, I think it's important to step up and talk about that now and to keep the pressure on to get us back to where we were between 1965 and 1986.
So the questions are pouring in. We have only time for a few of them. Here's one very different topic. Media is reporting that the Newark mayor was arrested by ICE at a protest at an ICE facility. What are your thoughts about that? Who wants to lead?
Well, let me just say, I was unaware of that, and I have no idea what happened. I do know that I have some colleagues who I believe were going to that ICE
Yes,
facility.
they
I
were
wonder.
there, and the
them.
media report is that they were pushed aside by the ICE agents who then arrested the mayor.
Yeah, I mean, if you view it in conjunction with the arrest of the Wisconsin state judge by ICE, they clearly are trying to frighten and intimidate people who hold public office and have political power from participating in a way to uphold the rule of law. And so that's what happens when you've got a lawless regime that wants to create a gangster state. They're going to be attacking other people who hold public office, who have oaths of office to the Constitution, and are trying to live them in a serious way. So I will look into that. Thank you for telling me. I also want to take the opportunity to say hello to the indispensable Heather Cox-Richardson. I did not know we were going to be on this together, and I'm thrilled to be here with you. And I think it gives me the opportunity to thank you for your instantaneous historical analysis and kind of frame setting for no matter what's going on. Thank you.
It's always a joy to work with you. And in fact, we should exchange contact information at some point. I have something different to say about that arrest, which I did have a chance to look into just a little bit. And of course, speaking of the larger picture, if you look at the things that are currently coming out of the administration, they are dramatically ramping up their attacks on migrants and on their policies toward migrants. So if you think about the arrest today, that's one thing, but we also have Deputy White House Chief of Staff Stephen Miller saying that the White House is looking into suspending the writ of habeas corpus because we are under attack. And to me, and I'm going to take a step back from that as well, that actually ties in with the fact that the White House seems to me to be in absolute disarray. And it certainly seems as if the President of the United States is not the one calling the shots. And the people who are ones who are using him as cover to accomplish what they want to accomplish. And as we are seeing the courts push back against the arrests of students, for example, and against the renditions of people to third countries, as that is ramping up in the courts, you're seeing this ratcheting up. And I am interested in that flashpoint because it seems to me that this is the attempt of an underling to put into position policies that are blatantly against the law. And I'm just really interested in how that's going to play out. So I think in order to recognize that this is a real ratcheting up and it's extraordinarily dangerous, and the threat to suspend the writ of habeas corpus is really big, but which is essentially martial law. But on the other side of that, I think, at least from the outside, it looks to me like one of the reasons he's willing to do that, he being Stephen Miller is my guess, is because the power of the administration is crumbling. And those two things, I think, are sort of in suspension right now. And which one's going to win is not clear. But I don't think this is solely a story of victory. I think it might be a story of weakness.
Thank you. So let me just say for everybody, we're going to have a couple more questions for Heather and Jamie, and then we're going to move into what you can do. So we're going to have a whole section of what actions we as citizens can take and how to connect with those. There are a series of interrelated questions that I'll just pose to you. There are many different ones, but so a lot of people are asking the obvious question about what can Congress actually do? Is there any chance of splitting off any Republicans? But then they're also asking, is there anything we can do about impeachment, particularly given the unconstitutional actions and the egregious grift and corruption? And then they're also saying, well, is there a way that we can get, what's the level we'd have to get to have a general strike or other massive actions? So sort of there's a whole thread of questions for you. Heather, you want to start, and then we'll go to.
Well, actually, why don't we throw that to the congressman? Because I think people are really curious about what Congress is doing and what we can do to support you.
Well, thank you. Wherever I go, people say, well, what's the one thing we can do? And I got that last weekend. I think I was in Long Island, and I had a town hall for two AWOL Republican members, Lolota and Garbarino, who couldn't quite bring themselves to face their own constituents. So I did it, and 2,000 people came out, and somebody said, well, what is the one thing we got to do? And I guess my answer to that is a bit of a dodge. The one thing you got to do is join a group that will tell you every day what you need to be doing. Because some days we need to be doing town halls for right-wing Republicans who are enabling this fascism to unfold in America. Some days we might need to travel to a neighboring state to help somebody who's running for governor or attorney general on a pro-democracy platform. Some days we'll have to go and be working with unions. Some days we will have to go and confront ICE if they're violating people's rights in an illegitimate, unlawful, unconstitutional way. So the main thing is to be part of a group that will let you know what needs to be done on any particular day. On the impeachment point, I obviously am a champion of the impeachment power. I think that impeachment is often the last line of defense against a completely lawless president who thinks he's a king and thinks that we have not a supreme constitution, but a supreme leader in the country. And so I think we need to be cataloging and inventorying all of the high crimes and misdemeanors that we see. But impeachment is obviously a constitutional instrument, and it is political in that sense. It requires a majority vote in the House and 2/3 of the Senate, and we don't have anything like that right now. So we have to continue to stand up for the rule of law and the Constitution at every turn against all of the lawlessness. And we'll figure out the right timing of when that might happen. But the president commits impeachable actions on a weekly basis, at least. And I think I maybe missed the original mention of general strike or mass boycott. All of those things need to be in our panoply of democratic self-defense, as we enter into this struggle. Right now, the courts are holding strong. They are hanging tough. We've got to defend the independent judiciary. We've got to defend the security of the judges against, vigilante and racist and fascist violence and attacks and doxing and all that kind of stuff. And we have to, defend them against these impeachment drives, ludicrous impeachment drives in Congress. We've impeached only 15 judges in our history, and it's always for something like bribery or tax evasion, or one guy, I guess it was habitual drunkenness, not even occasional drunkenness, but habitual drunkenness. We only impeach people for misconduct, corrupt misconduct, and they're talking about impeaching judges for rendering the correct decision on the birthright citizenship executive order or on guaranteeing due process to immigrants. So we need to shut that down, and it is a positive sign that several Supreme Court justices have basically spoken out about it, including Justice Jackson, including Chief Justice Roberts, who said that the proper response to a district court opinion you disagree with is to appeal the order, not to impeach the judge. So that was a fairly outspoken, rebuttal to what's been taking place. But the general strike, the mass boycott, all of those are things that need to be within our apparatus of political self-defense for democracy in the event that the president is dodging the lawful orders of a court. And let's just hope that the Supreme Court majority, at least, will hold for due process, for the freedom of speech, and so on. But ultimately, our safety is going to be in an engaged, vigilant citizenry that understands the Constitution, that understands our rights, and insists upon them.
And you create that in the same way that people did in Boston in 1775. You talk to people, you take up oxygen, you explain those root values. And that's something that you can do even on the days when you're not out protesting, where you simply make sure that you push back against the lies and reestablish a reality-based public discourse that talks about how the things that the administration is doing are destroying our right to be treated equally before the law, our right to have a say in our government, and our right to have equal access to resources. That's really effective at getting that great middle who hasn't been paying attention, because you're never going to change the Trumpers, the real diehard MAGAs. And there are a lot of people, and increasing people every day, who do want to restore democracy, but we need to have those people who are not paying attention, who say, oh, give him a chance, or, oh, he's not that bad, or I'm not paying attention to politics. Those are the ones you can reach just by talking.
One last question for each of you. What gives you hope? It's so hard these days, and so many of the people on this call, the thousands and thousands who are on this call, have asked, what gives you hope? Who wants to jump in? Heather?
Why don't I go and give the congressman the last word? You just said what gives me hope. There are many, many thousands of people on this call, and there are many people all around the country who care deeply about American democracy. And for so long, we thought the guardrails were simply always going to be there. And now that they are not, people are stepping up and taking over the idea that we must protect this incredibly precious birthright of ours. If you had asked me 20 years ago to talk about democracy, maybe I'd have gotten 3 people in a room. Now there are thousands and thousands, millions of us who are stepping up to the plate to take back our democracy. And the piece of that is so fabulous for me as a historian is that this is not the first time it looked like everything was lost. I mean, it certainly looked that way. First of all, the revolution itself was, sort of a pipe dream when it was first thought of, but people thought that way in the 1850s, and it certainly seemed in the 1890s, and then again in the 1920s, if you read your John Dos Passos, that it was all gone. They have clubbed us on the streets, and in each of those moments, ordinary people stepped up and they said to each other, listen, we may not agree about financing, and we may not agree about internal improvements, and we may not agree about immigration even, but by God, we can agree that we want to have equality before the law, a right to a say in our government, and a right to work hard and work our way up. And every time they have done that, in times that looked even more dire than where we are now in some ways, They have succeeded. And in the aftermath of that, they have built a society that is more open and more just and more fair than the society that came before. So what gives me hope is that I am part of a movement like that again. And that's also what brings me extraordinary joy, because we get the opportunity to do that for our country in our time. And that's a gift as well as a threat. So it gives me joy every day to pick up this work every morning when I wake up.
Thank you, Heather Cox-Richardson. Congressman Raskin.
My answer is very similar to that of Ms. Richardson, but I derive a lot of hope from history. There are so many generations of Americans who faced odds as bad as ours, in many ways worse than ours. You know, if you go back, you look at the Revolution, or you look at the Civil War, you look at the Civil Rights Movement and what Bob Moses was facing in Mississippi when he first went down there and fought for the right to vote in what was basically a closed state, a closed society. And he created the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and the Freedom Summer happened down there. The women who chained themselves to the White House fence fighting for women's suffrage, the labor movement, the environmental movement, the peace movement, everything that you were part of, and tell the story of Michael and Sarah during the Vietnam War. I mean, that was a 12-year struggle to shut down a war that was in violation of the Geneva Conventions. It was in violation of the U.S. Constitution. It was a bloody imperial mess. But college kids and unionists and millions of people from across the country got in it and shut it down. And there was never really anything like that before in American history. So all of these things give me great hope. And we have the benefit of all of the experience of the people who did those things for us. I derive a lot of hope from the young people today. This is a generation of young people who really are beyond racism and misogyny and anti-Semitism and homophobia. And I find sometimes they're a little bit beyond grammar too, but that's a different problem, I think, growing up with all the tweeting and the text and everything. But in any event, the young people, if we can properly engage them, are going to be on the side of strong democracy and freedom. And, I have the luxury of coming from a very blue district. And so I spend no money in my district on polling or TV or consultants or radio or any of that stuff. I put all my money into a school for young people, Democracy Summer, to learn about the civilizing movements of American history and to be engaged in the struggle today. And we go throughout the Mid-Atlantic, and this program, the Democracy Summer, has now been embraced by my colleagues in Congress. We're in 44 states, I think it is. We had 1,500 kids last summer, hoping we'll have the same number this summer. By next summer, the most important election of our lives, it'll be thousands, I think, of young people who get in it. So my dad used to say when we were growing up, when everything looks hopeless, you are the hope. So I grew up with that sense of guilt. So it's not hard for me to wake up to feel like I've got to get back in it. And my son, Tommy, he had a passage that he loved from Wittgenstein that he used to quote. And maybe I'll just close with that. Because Wittgenstein said that the truth of an empirical proposition is whether or not it corresponds to reality. And the truth of an analytical proposition is whether or not it corresponds to the rules of logic. But the truth of a moral or political proposition is the courage with which you act to make it real in the world. So I believe we've got millions and millions of people, the vast majority of the country, which believes in democracy and freedom in this century and will have the courage to go out and fight for it.
Well, thank you both. We're going to turn now to actually talk about what it is that people can do. But again, I want to thank you both for being here tonight, but I also want to thank you both for all the work that you have done and are doing and will do every day. So let's turn to what citizens can do. And I've noticed in the chat tons of suggestions, many of which we're going to cover right now. As I said at the beginning, we are in an urgent fight. It's a fight that must be waged in multiple arenas and with multiple strategies. The fight against Trump and MAGA needs each and every one of us. Volunteer Blue can help you find opportunities to make a difference. We make it easy to volunteer. While we started with a focus on elections, we've now broadened out to include protests as well. We have a comprehensive calendar where all our partners list actions and volunteer opportunities. Every day, new opportunities are posted. It's a one-stop shop for activism. We also have coaches who will work one-on-one with you if you or your small group are searching for the activities that are most suited to you. All of that's on the website, volunteerblue.org. Tonight, we have over 40 partners who are offering you opportunities to join the fight. Let me walk through some examples of upcoming opportunities. We need to keep protesting. You can click on Join a Protest on the Volunteer Blue homepage, which will take you to the organizations organizing protests and to specific upcoming actions. You'll find links to Indivisible, to 5051, to Tesla Takedown, to 5 Calls, and many more. The next massive national protest will be on Flag Day, June 14th. That's the day when Trump is spending millions on a military parade to mark his birthday. We'll turn out millions of people to say no kings. Then on July 17th, there will be a John Lewis Good Trouble Day of action. Please start organizing your friends and networks to turn out. We need to make these protests even bigger than those on April 5th and May Day. We need to keep up unrelenting pressure on Congress. On the calendar, you can find actions to do exactly that. Every time a congressional representative holds a town meeting, hundreds must be there demanding that they do their job and uphold the Constitution. And if Republicans won't hold town meetings, then as Representative Raskin has shown, we must organize them anyway. We need to keep the calls pouring into Congress. For example, you can join Commit to Democracy in a virtual group to all call Congress together. Super easy and fun to do. And there are many other phone banks being organized by different groups each week, and you can find them on Volunteer Blue. There are elections this year, perhaps sooner than the Trump administration can find to sabotage them. You can find ways to help with those by clicking on All Volunteer Blue Actions, that button on the webpage, which will take you to the general calendar of actions. We are also dropping into the chat a document with links to every action. It was wonderful to see everyone volunteering for the recent Wisconsin Supreme Court race that we won so decisively. Now we need to do the same in Virginia and New Jersey. Over the next months, you will find volunteer opportunities to help in those races. Right now, you can make phone calls into Virginia every week, wherever you are in the country, with Grassroots Democrats HQ to help Abigail Spanberger win the governorship. Or you can focus on one state, like the critical battleground state of North Carolina, and work with the All In for North Carolina to elect a Democrat to the US Senate in 2026 and turn North Carolina totally blue. You can find many opportunities to donate and raise money for candidates, campaigns, and organizations. Money is so critical to this fight. One of our partners, Force Multiplier, does an incredible job. They do the best small d Democratic fundraising I have ever seen, and they need more people to help them. You can register Democrats right from your home with Field Team 6. They're having a Register Democrats National Summit on May 22nd. Working with our partners, we're starting an important new effort that I want to take a moment to describe to you. There are roughly 35 Republican congressmen in districts that they carried by less than 10 or 12%. They are vulnerable. We need to do two things. First, we need to put as much pressure now as we can on those congressmen from people in their districts, so that we just might possibly peel off some to be a brake on Trump's agenda. Secondly, at the same time, we need to lay the groundwork to defeat those Republicans in 2026 and decisively take back the House. Working with our partners, Volunteer Blue is starting a program to call, text, and postcard into those districts to stir up as much pressure as we possibly can. We're starting in a small number of pilot districts, and then we'll ramp up in the coming months. Please join this effort. If you'd be willing to make calls, send text or postcards, or post on social media, please commit today to join this red state effort. You can add your name on the link in the chat or come to the Volunteer Blue website to sign up. We need you to help us reach into those red state districts. Right now, you can join Activate America for postcarding into swing congressional districts. Easy to do. Activate is also calling into California 22, which is one of those swing districts. They need you. Grassroots Democrats HQ is calling into those swing districts with a hands off our healthcare phone bank. They need you. All the links to sign up for these will be sent to you in a follow-up email. I could go on and on. There is absolutely the volunteer opportunity that will be right for you. You can find them on volunteerblue.org. And again, if you're unsure of what's best for you, sign up for a coach. Trump wants us to feel powerless, that there is nothing we can do, that we are all alone. He's wrong. We need to fight and fight on all fronts. I don't need to tell you the urgency of this struggle. We need to be constantly increasing Trump's unpopularity. We need to keep up unrelenting pressure on Congress. We need to be prepared to launch massive boycotts. We need to fight in the courts. We need to stiffen the spine of every elected Democrat. We need to demand that governments of blue states actively oppose the illegality. We need to support those institutions that stand up to Trump's unconstitutional bullying. We need to break off a few vulnerable Republican representatives. We need to win back Congress in the upcoming midterms. And we need to make the protests grow into a tidal wave of opposition. I know it can seem overwhelming, but you are not alone. Just think of the thousands of people on this Zoom today who are ready to work with you. Perhaps the most important thing we need to do, all of us, is to become organizers. No one is riding in on their white horse to save us. Only organized, massive people power will save us. If you're not in a local group, please join one. Join Indivisible, or the Union, or Third Act, or any one of our partner organizations, or start your own group. On May 15th, Activate America is offering a virtual training on Organizing 101. We'll send you the link to sign up. They'll teach you the basic skills of organizing. Please think about joining that training. And at the least, in the next week, call and email people you know to ask them to join you and join the movement to save our democracy, to march with you on June 14th, to call, to send postcards, to make phone calls, to write letters, to visit Volunteer Blue and find the right action for you. People want to do something. They just need to know what they can do and that they're not doing it alone. Look today at how many people are ready to do something. We had over 19,000 people sign up for this Zoom. I wish you could see them all. These are people you can count on. You are not alone. We are going to build a movement with millions of Americans fighting Trump and MAGA. We can save our democracy, but it requires all of us to become organizers. It will not be easy. It will not be quick, but we will win. I want to remind you of the courage and organizing that ended legal segregation in our country. The civil rights movement faced huge opposition, arrests, and violence. Yet with courage, strategy, determination, and organizing, and still more organizing, they overcame. With courage, strategy, determination, and organizing, we will overcome again. Our country was born out of a struggle against tyranny. It was no kings then, and it is no kings now. I want to thank each of you for joining us tonight and for the hard work that I know you will be doing in the coming months. Look for an email. It'll have both a link to the recording and will have all the links and all the partners that we'll be sending to you in the coming days. Thank you so very much. Take care. Good night.
an easy, easy thing should be. Why can't you and me learn to love one another? Now all the world's over, so easy to see. People everywhere just wanna be free. I can't understand, it's so simple to me. It is. People everywhere just got to be free. If there's a man who is down and needs a helping hand, all it takes is you to understand and to pull him through. Seems to me we got to solve it individually. And up to you what you do to me. Situation for a man to be free. Get right on board now. Huh. Huh. Yeah. Oh, the feels just come over me. It's enough to move a mountain, make a blind man. Leave out everybody dance. Come on, let's go see. Peace in the valley, now we all can be free. Look, see that train over there? That's the train of freedom. It's about to arrive any minute now. You know it's been a long overdue. Look out, cause it's coming right on through. Ha, ha, yeah, yeah. Ha, ha, yeah, yeah.
I used to bite my tongue and hold my breath, scared to rock the boat and make a mess. So I said quietly, agreed politely. I guess that I forgot I had a choice. I let you push me past the breaking point. I stood for nothing, so I fell for everything. You held me down, but I got up, already brushing off the dust. You hear my voice, you hear that sound, like thunder gonna shake the ground. You held me down, but I got up. Get ready, cause I've had enough. I see it all, I see it now. I got the eye of the tiger, fire, dancing through the fire. Cause I am a champion, and you're gonna hear me roar louder, louder than a lion. Cause I am a champion, and you're gonna hear me roar. You're gonna hear me roar. Now I'm floating like a butterfly, stinging like a bee. I earned my stripes. I went from zero to my own hero. You held me down, but I got up, already brushing off the dust.